So folks, welcome. This is Pastor Rick, your Utah wine pastor. And today I have a real surprise and a real pleasure. I get to connect once again with a dear friend. Um, we've got in-house Dr. David Rowe, and he and his lovely wife Hazel have joined Bonnie and me for an evening of dinner. And before that, we're going to spend a little time talking together um, about our shared experience in seminary and about quite a few other things. So, welcome to this podcast. And Dave, I just want to thank you and Hazel for coming here and spending some time with us today.
Honored to be with you, Rick. Pastor Rick, I should say.
It's been a while, yeah.
It's been a while. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to this.
Well, the pastor thing is funny for me. You might know that when I started seminary, I wasn't sure that it was going to be kind of a trip down pastor lane for me. Since I hadn't grown up in the church, but I was dealing with church people, I wanted to know some of their stories. So I thought, I'll take a class or two, Bible class, and sort of get up to speed on some of that. And apparently God had a different agenda. I ended up with a full load and on the Master Divinity course, and of course you were one of my professors, and so we'll talk about that later. But tell me about your faith background. You've been in Utah quite a while, and you've done some different things, but I didn't peg you for a Utah native.
And you would be right. I'm not a Utah native. Grew up in Texas. My earliest memories are Dallas, Texas. I am one who describes himself as a recovering fundamentalist.
Okay. Okay.
As a fundamentalist kid, my parents were, prayer before every meal, always in church on Sundays, always. And the old rubric was, we don't smoke, dance, drink, or chew, and don't date the girls who do. That kind of thing.
That sounds like the South. That's the South, yeah.
Your life tends to be full of kind of don'ts. On Christmas morning, one of my memories, before we could open a single present, my dad had to read the entire gospel account of the Christmas narrative in the longest version, Luke,
yeah.
Had to have the longest version, and we sat there and endured that before we could open our present.
Before you could ride the bike that Santa Claus brought you for Christmas. I love that.
That's a little bit of the world of, fundamentalism. I'm, a Protestant evangelical generally, but nowadays I probably don't use that term very much. When I self-describe, I just say I'm a Jesus follower.
Yeah.
I'd prefer that. A lot of misunderstandings around the term evangelical.
I'll tell you, at seminary, one of the requirements of the Master Divinity is that you do a year-long internship at a local church. And I was fortunate enough to do my internship at a church and with a pastor that I'd had some experience with before, and they were Zion Evangelical Lutheran Church. And as part of that internship, I sat in on all their council meetings, and they had misgivings about having evangelical in their 125-year-old name.
I bet they did.
And there was an issue around that. They didn't change it. They talked about it, but I can appreciate what you're talking about. It's
changed.
It is, and the definitions and the sort of even the understandings of words change.
Yeah, the perceptions that the word creates.
Yep.
Changes culturally. Yep. So that's the way it is. But I still do hold some anchors that come out of. It would be true of historic fundamentalists as well as evangelicals. A biblical worldview, Jesus Christ at the center, and all that kind of thing.
Yep.
I still hang on to that.
No, and being in the Lutheran camp the way I was, I've been in both liberal and conservative Lutheran churches, and sometimes some of that biblical worldview gets lost when you get in one camp versus the other. So you have to be sort of aware of that. I'm intrigued too, and I think you've told me this before. And even your middle name. Can you talk about that a little bit?
My parents gave me the wonderful middle name Livingston. And I remember when I finished my PhD work, I walked into my class one day. I don't know if you were in this class, Rick, or not, but the students had hung a big banner across the front of the classroom saying, Dr. Livingston, we presume.
We presume. No, I wasn't in on that, but I could have been. But I mean, that speaks a little bit, doesn't it, to sort of the spiritual expectation on you in your life.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to live into that.
Yes.
What was that like as a youth?
As I grew, I came to understand this is a privilege. It's not something I have to live into. It's I get to. It's a high honor. Because this was a great, great man, David Livingston. And so, I don't know. As a kid, I didn't make much of it, and I didn't very often use my middle name.
Right.
And my mom might have when I did something wrong, you know.
David Livingston, get in here.
David Livingston, Rowe, get over here. Yeah.
Oh, that's good, though. So your own faith background, sort of from the South, fundamentalist, but it's a long ways from Texas. And did you spend time on the East Coast at all?
Yes, and I did my undergraduate work at Rutgers University, the State University of New Jersey. So yeah, I've spent time on the East Coast as well.
So that's a long trek from the East Coast to Utah. How does a guy who grew up in the South end up at Rutgers, end up in Utah? Because ministry here, it's one of the things that drew Bonnie and me to Utah, because the time that I spent here in my first career in the insurance business, we really learned to love the physical aspect of Utah, because it's beautiful, but we developed a heart for the people here too. And after all those years in the Bay Area where spiritual matters weren't something that you could easily talk about, we remembered our time in Utah where faith was a topic that came up all the time.
Yeah.
Not always in the way that we expected.
Yeah.
But so what brings you from the South and from the East to Utah? What was that story like?
Well, it was 1975, the year I will name, and I had become appointed under a mission society with the name Missions Door. That's its name today. It wasn't at the time, but we'll just use that. And I had become a missionary.
Okay.
And my wife and I were praying about and looking at maps and studying cultures where we might be placed and where we might gain a vision for God leading us to some place. I don't have a background dealing with Mormon culture or anything in Utah. I wasn't familiar with it. But this became one of two final options on the short list.
Where was the other one?
The other one was Quebec, Canada.
Oh.
And it would have been a French-speaking ministry. And I was going into campus ministry. And as we prayed about it, Hazel was uncomfortable with Quebec. Oddly enough, because she was a French major in college.
Oh, my.
I don't know. She probably could have done the language okay. But as we prayed about it, we only gained unity on the option of Utah.
Wow.
And so we just came here and learned what the territory was all about. A lot of learning the hard way.
Did Mission Store have other people here, or were you sort of out here on your own?
No, we had one other person they had placed here.
Wow. In student ministry?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, he was just in ministry to Utah people. He's a former Mormon himself.
Wow.
And I learned a lot from him.
Sure.
Marvin Cowan. And
I think you introduced me to him. I think we've met. He was a cool dude, if I remember right.
He's a delightful dude.
Yeah. So that's neat.
Interesting.
I didn't know I didn't know that you had that connection early on.
Yes.
Pretty neat.
I did. I see him in many ways as a mentor.
Mm.
Yeah.
So when you came to Utah, you were you felt specifically called to like student ministry
Yeah.
or so I assume University of Utah.
I was with a Missions Door program called Campus Ambassadors.
Okay.
It's a campus, the field name for our campus workers. And I did campus ministry at the University of Utah,
Yeah.
for 18 years. So, yeah.
What was that like?
It waxed and waned. We had some really glorious years, some great times, with lots of students involved and people coming to Christ. And I enjoyed that. And then we had other years that were more of a slump. And I got kind of burned out toward the end of those 18 years, kind of saying, I'm just exhausted with this. I don't have the heart for it I did once.
Right.
And so I was kind of losing and looking for where to go next. So anyway.
Well, but here's something I was wondering about. Is like when strangely, oddly, people listen to these podcasts. They're not all in Utah. It's funny, and I don't know. We had somebody download one of our sessions from Germany. We've had a few in Canada. I don't know if that was related to you, but lots from California and maybe don't really understand sort of the Utah dynamic. So when you do campus ministry in Utah, we think of generally three big schools. There's the University of Utah, there's Utah State, and then there's Brigham Young. Now, Brigham Young is strictly Mormon, right? I mean, it's the Mormon Church University, basically.
We might modify that a little, saying non-Mormons can go there.
Yeah.
It is a church school owned and operated.
Well, and of course, the going back way into my youth, Brigham Young has also had some phenomenal football teams, and they recruit people who are definitely not Mormon, the likes of Jim McMahon, for example, who come from out of state, and the whole Mormon thing is like completely lost on them. But you were at the University of Utah, and the mix of spiritual backgrounds at the University of Utah has to be a little more diverse than, say, at Brigham Young, for example, right? Was that your experience? What percentage of the people at University of Utah would you say were LDS?
About 50%.
50%. That's less than probably a lot of people think. A lot of people think that Utah is completely monolithically Mormon, and it's not the case, is it?
Not the case at all. And the other 50%, and we used to joke about at the University of Utah, there's enough secularization in the atmosphere, the climate of the school, that they're either committed Mormons or they're anti-Mormons.
There is a lot of that.
There is a lot of that. Kind of this adversarial relationship. And you
see that on the big day, big game day is when Utah versus BYU football was our experience when we were here in the 80s. Because we came here totally unaware of that sort of dichotomy. You're either University of Utah or you're BYU.
Yeah.
You weren't both.
You're red or blue.
Yeah. And so if you were, and we lived in a red neighborhood, it took me a while to figure that out, but that's the way that goes. So you were 18 years at the University of Utah.
Yes.
Wow. And then suddenly or over the time you felt called out of that and into something else?
Yeah, I had, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here, maybe, but
that's all right.
I had reached a point where I felt I needed some re-stimulation. So I checked into a master's program in communication at the U, and I just became a student again.
Oh, wow.
Now, this was a second master's degree. I already had a Master of Divinity degree on top of my bachelor's from Rutgers University. And the second master's degree got me warmed up for a different kind of work. And I got called into by Ken Mulholland, who was then the president of Utah Institute for Biblical Studies. It's a mouthful. And he said, we need a dean of students. He came to me one day and I said, oh, maybe I could consider that. And I consulted my mission society headquarters, and they said, yeah, we'll put you on loan. We'll do a strategic partnership with the Utah Institute and let you be the dean of students. You're a missionary disguised as a dean of students, right? So
So yeah,
that's
you
what
got to wear
happened.
two hats.
So I got to wear two hats.
Well,
And
you mentioned Ken Mulholland, and this is sort of where our stories start to come together a little bit, right?
yeah,
So yeah, we don't have any track that we have to exactly follow here. So let's just talk about that. How long was the Utah Institute of Biblical Studies around before it became Salt Lake Seminary?
ooh, I don't remember the exact. It was at least 10 years,
Wow.
something
I
like
didn't know
that.
it was that long.
Yeah, and its whole life was only about 25 years.
Yeah.
Well, only, but that was good. It was a good run.
Yeah. And I came in on the tag end of it, and we'll talk
Yeah,
about that in a minute.
yeah,
But so during this time, you functioned as the missionary, but also as dean of students
yeah,
for this.
yeah.
What would be like a typical course of study that somebody coming to that institute would decide to take up?
We would want them to go through a good solid survey of the entire Bible. So you'd have Old Testament survey classes, New Testament survey classes. We'd want them to have then maybe some specialized studies in an area of the scriptures that they felt drawn to. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
special books, a book of the Bible. Do a whole course in that. There were some language studies as well.
Really? So you got to do some Greek and some Hebrew?
Little Greek, little Hebrew, more often Greek, the New Testament original language,
Mm-hmm.
of course. Um, and classes on spirituality, which tended to be the kind of thing that I would teach. That and homiletics, which is the fancy word for preaching.
Preaching, yeah.
How to communicate God's word. My
Yeah.
PhD work then became a PhD in communication. And this is where I'm going to drop in a line from one of my mentors who said, some people go through life and they're just dying by degrees.
Ooh.
That described me,
Ooh.
2 master's degrees. And then Ken Mulholland said, well, if you're going to stay with this, you better get a PhD. So I said, well, okay, I'll apply. So I did that in process.
And did you get your doctorate from the U then also?
Yeah, from the
communications?
Yes, in communication.
Well, and I would be the first to tell everybody that among faculty and staff I was blessed to connect with at Salt Lake Seminary, Dr. David Livingston Rowe here is a premier communicator. I've had the privilege of hearing him preach, and he's preached for me when I'd go on vacation. He'd come to Mountain of Faith and preach for me. I guess I would say this: there's no substitute for competence, and you know your stuff. And so when people get a chance to hear you preach or to teach, it's a blessing. So all these years, I didn't know that the Biblical Institute had that much history before becoming Salt Lake Seminary, and wasn't that move to becoming a seminary? Wouldn't you? Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but would you sort of classify that as a good news, bad news kind of a thing? Because there were some certainly some positives that came to that, but there were also some downsides. Anything like that that you can relate to?
Well, it took some extra work. There was a lot, you do a lot of making sure the coursework is up to snuff for accreditation standards.
Right.
And that didn't fall on my shoulders particularly. Tom McClenahan, the academic dean,
Yeah.
had to give a lot of hours and probably some sleepless nights to that kind of thing, just making sure that we were up to snuff. And so it's not easy, not an easy road.
No, but it's fruitful from the standpoint that the people who come out of Masters of Divinity programs can then become pastors in their own
Yeah.
right and lead
Yeah.
local churches. I mean,
Hmm.
that's exactly, that wasn't my intent going in, but obviously that was God's plan for me. I had no
Yeah.
idea going in that that's the way it would turn out. Gosh, that was just those were, so the Master of Divinity program. Can we talk about that a little bit? Because that was my intro into Salt Lake Seminary. Um, just some great people. And what were the, uh, can you talk about a little bit about the requirements if somebody decided they wanted to get into the Master of Divinity? What are the expectations that they would have to sort of meet to complete the program?
There would be kind of traditional disciplines. You would learn how to discourse with with theological frameworks
Mm-hmm.
in a way that you probe the understanding of the scriptures like scholars have done through the centuries.
Yeah.
And you study church history and how people have discussed a certain topic or handled a certain topic. So, for example, the creation story, perhaps in Genesis.
Yes.
How's that handled through the ages? Or on the other end of the spectrum, eschatology, as it's called. What's the final state of things on the earth and in the heavens toward which God is moving us?
Right. Sort
And
of
you
where you
learn
were, where you are, and where you're going, right? Yeah.
And then there's always the mix of, as I mentioned, just good biblical study, going through the scriptures and understanding Old Testament, New Testament, the characteristics of both. And then the life of Christ, especially central
Yes.
to it all, studying the Gospels, and then pastoral care and things that have to do with what a pastor has to deal with in everyday life.
Yeah, exactly. And that's part of what that's part of what you want to expose people to during this internship that lasts 12 months.
Yeah.
So yeah, and Dave, as I remember conversations that I had with staff during my time at, especially leading up to the Master of Divinity program, was that there was a term that was used, rigorous, that I think I really kind of took to heart, is that you don't get into a program like this thinking that it's going to be just something that you can do on the side or sort of as an avocation almost. When you start talking about rigor and the academic rigor that you have to, and boy, I'll tell you, some of the some of the faculty that I interacted with at Salt Lake Seminary, I'm thinking of James Wakefield and Tom McClanahan and Ron Huggins and yourself, of course, Bill Hersink. To function in those classes, you just didn't waltz through them.
It wasn't a
There was
cakewalk.
some rigor involved in your study, and if you didn't sort of appreciate that, it was easy to get buried in there, and I started late. I don't know if I was the oldest person in all my classes, but I think I might have been in a lot of them. But there is I don't know if I would say that if there's a determination that people have when you enter that kind of um, rigorous program that just makes it a joy to be with other people who are sort of committed at that same level. And you learn from each other, not just from the faculty. You learn from each other as you go through it.
And it's challenging and exciting at the same time.
Yeah.
We don't walk away. I remember we didn't walk away from giving you guys plenty of work to do if you were studying in our classes, because we are probing the mind of God, the Word of God, the Bible, and we don't want to take that lightly.
No.
And that was something we were very serious about.
Yep. I could tell that. So I could tell that. Well, as a matter of fact, with my Lutheran background, I didn't grow up Lutheran, but as I came to faith, it was sort of within this Lutheran context. And I'll paraphrase it, but Martin Luther once said that if you are not, my words, scared to death when you step up to preach the word of God, there's something wrong. Yeah. It's an awesome responsibility.
Yeah, it is.
And you don't you just can't take it lightly.
Yeah,
You
that's
know.
right.
So
Yeah.
can we talk a little bit about, I don't know, you might not remember this, but I remember my first class with you, Dave. Do you?
Oh,
So it was a worship class, worship and spirituality. I don't remember the exact
yeah.
name of it, but so my first experience in your class,
Huh.
we didn't have the banner up, Dr. Livingston, we presume, but you challenged us in the very first day of class. You will probably remember this, that you challenged the students to express what worship meant to
Mm-hmm.
you. Now, I'd studied a little bit. I thought that I was kind of prepared for this. And so, we're all writing out our definitions of worship, right? And I'm writing out mine, and I'm talking about praise and thanksgiving, and I include the idea of corporate worship. It's important, and yeah, I just felt pretty good about it. And then I gave it to you, and I don't know if it happened on the spot, or maybe if you made a comment and handed it back the next session. But I was always struck by this. Your comment to me was, "This is great, but where's the fear and trembling? Where is the fear and trembling?" And you know what? That made a big impact on me, because
Wow.
if you don't understand that it's part of your job,
Yeah.
leading worship and being a pastor, to bring people into the presence of God, and you can't do that lightly, you need to do that with a certain amount of fear and trembling. That stuck with me.
I don't have a memory of saying that, but it does sound like something I would have said.
Yeah, there you go. That's the way that should work.
It sounds in character, I guess.
Fear and trembling. So yeah, well, but that did stick with me.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit? And this isn't about me, all about me, but I part of what I wanted to share with people was our shared experience, spiritual experience, particularly as it was at Salt Lake Seminary. Now, what people may not know is that my wife, Bonnie, was on staff at the seminary, and she routinely describes that time as the best gig she ever had. So she loved her time there.
I
And
remember that.
And at Salt Lake Seminary, because it was would you say that saying it was intimate would be an overstatement of?
No, that's true. It was a family atmosphere, and she was a great, great staff worker and really blended into the team very, very well.
So it was intimate, not just among the faculty and the staff, but students were included in that.
Yeah.
And one of your experiences is going in before class and into the faculty room and getting a good cup of coffee so that you could sort of mentally prepare your brain to be stimulated. And so at Salt Lake Theological Seminary, we felt like that was a worshiping community for us, because chapel was definitely a part of that.
Yeah.
So not only would you get to hear students preach during chapel, but faculty also. So we got exposed to some great word.
And visiting lecturers.
The word proclaimed. Like France Davis, for example, came in.
Yeah.
He, for folks that don't know France Davis in Utah, African-American preacher, long-time preacher at a black church in Salt Lake City, and amazing guy.
Yeah.
And when he preached, you just you're on the edge of your seat.
Oh, yeah.
I remember one of his sermons. He was talking about how he had to be under new management, and he'd drive by this gas station that was under new management. It was the Save More gasoline station. And so under this new and how you had to be under new management after you gave your life to Christ. And it was, I mean, we did everything except the call and response.
Amen.
To France Davis as he was preaching.
Preach it, brother.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um,
I love African American preaching.
and
It's just
he was an
like,
institution in Salt Lake
oh, he was, in my estimation, he was Mr. African American leader in Utah. He was,
for
if the
decades.
media wanted to know what, you know, black people were thinking in Utah, they go to him first
France, yeah,
to give voice to that. Yeah, he was the guy they consulted. Yep.
yeah. Well, let me. You're you did some work in communications and homiletics. You talked about.
Mm-hmm.
One of my fond memories at Salt Lake Theological Seminary was my homiletics class. And it was weird because it started out with the president of the seminary teaching it,
Mm-hmm.
but mid year, he left. And his position was taken up by Catherine Putnam. Do you remember Catherine,
Mm-hmm.
the pastor from the Presbyterian Church in Salt Lake?
Yeah.
And she was amazing. And I'd had experience dealing with Catherine as a consultant. We did some consulting work with one of her churches. We had this great relationship with her.
Wow.
And then to have her as our homiletics instructor
Wow.
was a thing of beauty. And I remember one of the things that she talked about in terms of her own preparation for delivering a sermon. She was an associate pastor at, it was either Cottonwood, was it Cottonwood Presbyterian?
Cottonwood Press.
Yeah. And she was an associate pastor there. And when it was her week to preach, um, she would always do the requisite amount of research and writing out the thoughts for the sermon. And her senior pastor would always check on her progress, she said. And he would say to her, Catherine, have you cried yet in preparing your sermon? And whether she cried yet or didn't cry yet was sort of the basis as to how ready she would be. And I really take that to heart because I'm a weeper. I can appreciate that. When I was on this last road trip that Bonnie and I took, that one of the young ladies that had been at Mountain of Faith during my 14 years there asked me to go to Minnesota to officiate at her wedding. And so here's this young lady that I knew from practically kindergarten or first or second or third grade, and now she's getting married.
Wow.
And she and her family have been through some stuff that we've been through together. Yeah. And then at that moment where the barn doors opened and she walked out with her father, we both just lost it. So I can relate to Catherine. Have you wept yet?
I could see why.
And so that's something that's important to me. But you have to admit that sometimes when you're preparing for a sermon, and especially in a homiletics class, when you're getting critiqued on your sermons, there's not always a lot of joyful weeping for joy, but there's some funny stuff that happens. And I don't know if you ever heard about this story when one of my classmates, now he will remain nameless in this story, but he's now a pastor. He started out as a Lutheran pastor. Now he's back east in another denomination. But we had to do various sermons during our homiletics class, and Catherine was the instructor. So this individual gets up to do his sermon on the beginning of the book of John, and he's talking about the coming of John the Baptist, right? And he starts out this story, and he gets us on the edge of our seat because we don't know exactly where he's going, but he's talking about Zach and Liz. So Zachariah and Elizabeth, who's going to be the parents of John the Baptist, right?
All right.
And so he's telling now about the encounter that Zachariah has in the temple when the angel shows up.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you know the story, it's an intimidating presence with the angel there.
Sure.
And this student, in his homiletics sermon that he's giving to the rest of us to critique, he says the angel shows up and Zach has his oh crap face. And right away I see Catherine, she has her head down and she starts writing. And it's like, and then he goes on with the sermon and we're it's amazing. We're laughing, but she says, Michael, I screwed up. I gave his name by accident. Michael, when you're in the pulpit, it's probably not best to use that terminology. I would bet that got talked about in a faculty meeting.
Probably.
Probably so. I want to wind this up. I don't want this to go on too long, but the last few years at Salt Lake Theological Seminary were amazing. And I started in 2005 this 3-year degree program. The Master of Divinity took me 4 years to get through. And so I wouldn't have been out of it until 2009. Now, people with a memory of how things went in 2008 would have an appreciation for what happened at Salt Lake Seminary. Can we talk about that a little bit? Because it was mind-blowing how the staff responded to that. Just your recollection of it.
Well, I'm not sure which part of that you're referring to, but I do remember we had a growing crisis in terms of financial support for the ministry of the seminary. And it just became something that, as those who were in touch with the books, it was, of course, the year of the housing crisis nationally, and the whole economy was...
And the savings and loan crisis and all of that was snowballing at the time.
Just an awful year that way. One of our major donors had to pull out.
Yeah.
And that kind of took all the wind out of the sails.
And just so people know, Salt Lake Theological Seminary at the time wasn't sponsored by any one denomination. No. We didn't get like support from any one denomination, right? We were multi-denominational.
We were multi-denominational. That's right.
And so that was a good news, bad news kind of a thing. But since when the financial wall got hit in 2008, some tough decisions had to be made.
That's right. So we pulled in, we just tightened things up the best we could. And then one day our president at the time gathered the whole staff together in the chapel and tearfully, in fact, I remember this, said, it breaks my heart, but we're going to have to close our doors.
Yeah.
We were going, I think he said 60,000 a month in the red.
Yeah.
It was horrible. And it just wasn't honoring to the Lord. We couldn't continue that way. So we had to close our doors.
But this last class, see, 2008 is when the financial wall was hit.
Yeah.
But you didn't close doors until after 2009.
No, we didn't. And the professors volunteered their time in many cases, that whether they had a paycheck or not, and just finished up the students that were preparing to graduate. And I remember that. It was kind of a rich thing. I don't know how to express it. It was sobering, but pretty rich at the same time. And we were really overjoyed to be able to graduate that last class.
Well, and you're being humble about this, because what Dave isn't saying is that a lot of that staff worked pro bono for a long time to get that last class, of which I was a part, graduated.
Yes.
And of that class, I can think of at least 3 other students that were able to secure pastors' jobs because the seminary got us our degrees.
Yeah.
And lots of denominations, they didn't want to talk to you unless you had your MDiv.
Yeah.
And so these dedicated, sacrificially giving professors and staff people that literally worked pro bono to get our class through was a true gift of God. And you just never know what the ripple effect on something that is going to be.
No. We looked at our students and looked at our responsibility before the Lord to train them, and we just said, how can we do otherwise?
Yeah.
We just thought, we need to finish these people up.
And what a blessing and what a gift that was.
It was a privilege.
Yeah. And so, and here we are. After that, I'm the day after I'd been preaching at Mountain of Faith. I don't know if you know this, but I'd been preaching at Mountain of Faith for a year before I graduated. Mountain of Faith had lost their pastor.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was sort of a get to know you thing.
I do remember that.
I was preaching there for a year. And the day after I graduated, which was like a Friday or a Saturday, they called and ordained me to be their permanent pastor.
Wow.
And then I was there 14 years. That never would have happened if these sacrificial gifts hadn't been given by the staff and faculty at Salt Lake Seminary. I'm forever grateful. So thank you for the part that you played in that. You don't know how it affected my life. I appreciate it.
That's so kind of you to say.
So you're a big part of that. So, I think with that, we'll wind this up. What a pleasure just to sort of catch up and talk with you again.
Listen, pleasure's mine. It's a great trip down memory lane.
It sort of was. And from here, just so you don't get lost on the Utah wine pastor connection here, Dave and I are going to go out. We're going to cook some salmon for our lovely brides, have some good Pinot Noir with that, and enjoy some fellowship time together. So we'll look forward to that. Thanks, everybody. Thanks. Cheers and amen.